Chest up, shoulders back. This is Revival Fitness, your home for gains and brains. And I got a call from Mark Rippetoe. Well, he didn't actually call me, but I was called upon to react to this video from the Starting Strength channel. It is called You Will Look Better Heavier, and this is always a contested topic in this scene. What is the so-called ideal body fat percentage to be at for a man? Not only in terms of your overall gym performance, but also attracting women.
In the same place you would be during a deadlift, were the bar at this level. So that means here.
He is well known for telling guys to simply gain weight. That is the end-all be-all fix. Now that advice is going to work, for sure, but a lot of guys are not going to accept that, and they're not going to be happy with just pushing their body weight up and gaining more and more fat to see progress. And on that note, if you would like to get a training program that is in line with the basic principles of somebody like Rippetoe, but is not as bare bones and minimalistic, you can check out my programs on my site, linked down below for novices and intermediates. I break down everything you need to know to get big and strong and build an aesthetically pleasing physique, all with less time in the gym than you thought you needed.
If you're one of these people that wants to do this your way and wants to blame me because it didn't work doing it your way, then you're who I'm talking to today.
Notice the forearms on Rippetoe. I'm not sure if he has any kids, but he's undoubtedly got that dad strength. Maybe you just get that innately with age, even without kids. I guess the more kids you have, the more it just gets multiplied.
This is one of the more wonderful sentences I've ever written. It is common to want what you cannot have.
Very true.
Now, if you want to get big and strong, it requires more food than you think it's going to need, and it requires more rest than you really got time to devote.
In the case of needing more food, that's very common, especially for younger lifters and for hard gainers. You oftentimes hear people say things like, oh, I can look at a piece of cake and gain 5 pounds. I can look at pizza and gain 10 pounds. I can't relate to that. Depending on your circumstance, this is going to vary a lot. Everybody pushes themselves in the gym, or at least they should, but very different battles are fought when it comes to the eating. So one guy stuffs his face. He's practically getting sick, still can barely gain weight. Another guy tracks everything he eats to the T, and he still struggles to lose little bits of body fat. And the funniest part is, both guys wish they had each other's problems.
Depending on who you are, okay, all of this shit's going to look different. You get bigger and stronger. You accumulate strength by the process of growing your muscles. Muscles have to get bigger to get stronger.
Shocking concept for the hypertrophy cells, I know. Oh no, you can just technique your way into growing all this muscle, and you can actually lose strength on given exercises, but the muscle can get twice the size. Why? Because I said so, and a bunch of gullible novices believe me because it makes them feel better about their own strength. Great inhale there from Rip.
Here's an example. I want to get big and strong. I'm currently 22 years old, 5'9", and around 150 pounds.
Very standard. When I started, I was 5'10", and about 150 pounds. I've been there.
12% body fat. See, somehow he knows his body fat.
I would love to see a picture of this guy, but maybe he is 12% body fat. You know, who knows? But a lot of guys who get into the fitness scene and the lifting scene, they know much more about body fat analysis than they do about their actual macros. I was definitely not 12% body fat at that point. I was on the leaner side, but I did not have visible abs at all. But especially if you are a beginner, and unless you have the genetic gifts, which most people by default do not, you're not going to be able to see visible abs and look very good, even if you're leaner, without the muscle mass to back that up, so to speak. Full video on body fat analysis is coming because that is a very hard conversation, but we need to have it.
Oh, that tells me something about him, doesn't it?
That's exactly right. At 5'9", 150, if somebody tells you their body fat.
If somebody tells you your body fat, you're 5'9", 150, then you're a hard-headed motherfucker.
Oh, Rip's going to kill this poor guy, man.
I've been doing starting strength for 3 months now, and my weight has come up 8 pounds since I started.
8 pounds in 3 months, I wouldn't say that's bad. Just starting out, I mean, again, we don't know the absolute body composition here. I wish we had a visual reference for this, but we'll have to use our imaginations.
My squat is now stuck at 135.
135? Wow.
And I'm thinking that I need to move to the Texas method to get unstuck. Any advice you could give me, I'd appreciate.
Okay, for those of you that don't know, the Texas method is essentially the starting strength intermediate program, if you want to call it that. I did a bastardized version of it myself whenever I was still a novice, in novice purgatory in college, because kind of similar to this guy, this sounds eerily familiar to me and probably for a lot of you, I was stronger than that. I was well past 135 on squats, for example. I think I was deadlifting 315 plus, still couldn't bench even 165 to my chest properly. And I was like, oh, well, I saw the Texas method, I'm intermediate, because you convince yourself of these things. I talk to guys all the time, and they'll be like, I want to run your intermediate program, bro. And I'll be like, well, what are your numbers? It's always the same thing, man. These guys are benching like around 165 to 185. They squat 165 to 185. They deadlift maybe 225 to 250. Again, we just use the big three as general proxies because we can run down all these other exercises. The best is whenever guys will say like, oh, well, I leg press like 4 plates aside. But so many novices have a mental hang-up because they can't accept reality. Similar to what he was talking about. They just think, oh, well, I'm farther ahead than I am. I'm bigger than I am. And then they'll make all these excuses for their strength numbers. Oh, well, actually, it's X, Y, and Z. And it's like, no, bro, it's pretty darn simple. You just come up with all these things because your ego kind of knows the truth and it's trying to defend you and project out this better image. And depending on who you are and how quickly you can accept this and get better information in a lot of cases, this is why a lot of people stay stuck in novice purgatory forever. They'll be in the same situation for years, if not decades, in the gym.
If you're 5'9" and 150 pounds and you're stuck at any number on the bar,
Exactly.
that's the problem.
Right.
Stress, recovery, adaptation is not occurring. Because in this case, recovery is not being paid attention to.
See, this is where I'd love more context again because we don't know what exactly he's eating. Is it enough overall? I guess not, right? But I'd love to see this guy's form and intensity. This is the biggest thing when it comes to legs. I see this all the time. Like I just alluded to, a lot of guys talk to me, and this is very common across the spectrum. Their squat and their bench press are like a 1-to-1 ratio. Some guys are benching more than they squat. And even if you don't care about legs that much, you still should be able to easily squat more than you bench, just based on overall leverages and muscle mass distribution. But so many guys sandbag their lower body training. What that means is they don't put in full effort. I mean, a lot of guys, man, if they push their upper body really hard, they're going to total failure or very close to it all the time. They'll do that no problem because they want to have the good mirror muscles and get the good pump and flex and put it on Instagram with your freaking anime profile picture and your crappy little selfies on your feed. That's all you got. And then you comment on other lifters' content like you know anything. And then their leg training, they hit 4 reps in a reserve. They turn into Dr. Mike, like the weight barely even slows down at all, and they're like, all right, I'm gonna rack it. So even if this guy's not eating enough, you don't need to be eating sufficiently to surpass a 135 squat. You could weigh 100 pounds as a man. You should be able to get past 135 squat. You see what I mean? Like, just from the onset here, I think this is as much of an intensity problem, and we don't know the form either, but assume it's just generally good, I suppose. This is an intensity problem, not just a food problem.
A kid like this that's been training for 3 months, had he done the program, would not weigh 150, he'd weigh 180.
What?
180 pounds. Wait, he said he gained 8 pounds. He's 150. That means he started out at 142. So, based on what Rip just said, he's going to gain almost 40 pounds in the span of 3 months? Dude, the most genetically gifted guy on earth is going to have a very small muscle to fat gain ratio gaining that much weight that quickly. I talk about a lot the muscle to fat gain ratio. I aim for 1-to-1 on a bulk, and the better you can get it, muscle versus fat, go for it. A lot of guys, I'd say 1-to-1 is just a good general range, but that amount of weight gain that quickly, I mean, this is beyond turbo bulking. That is, I mean, a lot of guys genetically, they're not going to be able to even gain that much weight. You could force feed all you want, and you're just not going to be able to do it. Your body's going to stop you.
He wouldn't be stuck at 135. He'd be stuck at, if he stuck at all, he'd be squatting 315.
315 squat in the span of 3 months. I think that's a bit far-fetched for the average guy. Now again, if you get up to 180 pounds, like he said, sure, you should be squatting that much. 3 months, okay, maybe over the course of an entire year.
Or 275 anyway.
He may be, it doesn't matter, but he may be 15% body fat, which would be it would be imperceptible. The difference would be
you cannot tell the difference.
You wouldn't be able to tell
in a person, but whether it's 12% body fat or 15%.
You have not spent much time in the hypertrophy online community because they can definitely tell. And a bodybuilder myself, I've gone through the entire cutting process. You know, you get much more granular and meticulous about body fat. That said, to the average person, they're barely going to notice those differences. I mean, to the general public, once you build up some muscle in your shoulders and arms and your back, you know, your traps start to pop out a bit more, you are so-called jacked to the general public during your novice gains.
What you will see if they put 150, 200 pounds on their squat, and since they commensurately put 250 pounds maybe on their deadlift,
right.
What you're going to see in a person like that is you're going to see broader shoulders, bigger neck, more muscular forearms,
Right.
a bigger, wider chest, deeper hips, front to back,
Look at the size of that ass!
outer quad sweep, all this other shit that bodybuilders are concerned about. You're going to see all of that in that 30 pounds of weight gain.
You will look dramatically different after 30 pounds of, notice he said weight gain, that's not all muscle gain. That is beyond a stretch to achieve in 1 year. I see some charts and they say like, oh, the average trainee can gain 20 pounds of lean muscle mass in their first year. Some guys can do that. Again, talking averages here. People love to use these outliers as examples. I don't think the average guy is going to be able to do that. I would say 12 to 16 pounds for the average guy is more realistic. Let's assume over the course of 1 year, the lifter gains 30 pounds of weight, and let's use the upper end of my range and say 16 pounds of muscle mass versus 30 total pounds. That leaves us 14 pounds of fat. That is a better than 1-to-1 muscle to fat gain ratio. That is good in my estimation. So in that scenario, yes, the extra fat that you add, given that you've added so much muscle concurrently, you're really not going to notice it in any negative way. And I get comments all the time saying that, hey bro, I watched your content and I have bulked into more visible abs following your advice. So that is doable. I cannot guarantee that for every person, but to me that is one of the biggest goals for any lifter as they get more experienced. You want to be able to see visible abs at higher and higher body fats. So let's take that same 30 pounds of weight gain over the span of 3 months. If we are optimistic and assume 2 pounds of pure muscle gain per month, which if you're a total beginner, perhaps that is possible, but over the course of 3 months, 30 pounds, you gain 6 muscle, that means 24 is fat. That is an extremely skewed muscle to fat ratio. And also consider there's water weight too. We'll talk about that also in the upcoming body fat video, but that ratio is terrible, and in that case, even the muscle that you've gained, it's going to be so washed out and overshadowed by the fat that it's barely going to even be noticeable.
That is even under the circumstances of having increased body fat percentage. Now, this is the part that nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to accept this. Kid comes in at 12% body fat. He wants to be 10% body fat.
Right.
Yep.
He doesn't want to be 15, 16, even 18% body fat, even though he will look better. Because in his mind is Frank Zane.
Hey, Frank was a very aesthetic bra.
In his mind is a ripped Olympia competitor. That is the picture he has. And he doesn't understand, because he hasn't been made to understand, that that's not what he wants.
Well, it is what he wants. It's not what he's going to get anywhere in the immediate future, or even probably distant future.
And that's not what he can have. You can't always have what you want. You want to look better? Listen to what I'm telling you.
You get these young dudes who are jumping into fitness who, like he just said, they want to look like, whether it's Frank Zane or Ziz, David Lade, whoever they see. And then they see Rip looking like this. Then the camera pans to the people behind the desk, and they're all fat too. You're going to have a hard time getting them to, let alone listen to you, just even pay attention to you.
This is what you got here.
You've
got a problem with your perception of what body fat on you versus muscle on you is going to look like. All right.
And one of the things this comes down to, because people generally, they at this point, people know what's involved with starting strength in terms of the exercises and stuff. So people generally don't have a problem with that.
Well, there's also the issue of the problem with that, because if you get the average guy who is so-called chasing aesthetics, they're always chasing it, and they see starting strength, and there's like 5 or 6 total exercises. I mean, they may have an aneurysm. I mean, they're just going to be like, what are you talking about, brah? No curls, no lateral raises, no tricep extensions, no iliac fiber pull down, right? So from that aspect too, it's hard to attract the younger audience to simple training and principles like this. No, they want to see some guy with big giant shoulders talking about, hey, here's this special technique I do, and it burns, and I get a huge pump. I mean, that's going to win every single time. Even if the guy making that content has no legitimate idea what he's talking about, no idea of programming, and then the people that follow that, they don't get remotely those results, and then they wonder, well, what's going on? Then they'll often find something like starting strength, for example, after all that wasted time, and in a lot of cases, that wasted time is many, many years.
Maybe 4.5, 5 hours a week if you're just fucking around in the gym doing the program, doing the workout part of the program, but the part of the program that is critical to the recovery and adaptation thing takes place at home.
Right.
Takes place all the time. It's waking hours are all involved in this. It's much more intrusive.
That's the biggest thing a lot of people never fully grasp. Even if they do, they just won't let themselves totally adhere to it, I suppose. And that's also personal preference. I mean, if you don't care about your results that much, and you eat whatever you want, and, I don't feel like hitting the protein goal today, or I just want to go have a cheat meal, whatever it's going to be for your circumstance, that's fine, man. I mean, do whatever you want to do, but to really hone in on those results, like he was saying earlier, if you want to look like Frank Zane or all these guys you see, people think that they can just see somebody who looks a certain way and mimic them for a short amount of time, and then magic happens, and then, oh my god, I just woke up and looked like that. And anybody that's actually put skin in the game with training, you know that it does not work like that.
It's much more intrusive than the workout part of this thing.
Right.
You don't like to eat, you don't like to drink milk. I'm asking you to eat, drink milk 4 or 5 times a day.
I talk to so many dudes, and they're still saying things like, oh, well, I live at home and I eat what my mom makes. You cannot rely on your mom's cooking if you have serious goals to get big and strong, and you naturally do not get big and strong easily. You cannot rely on what your mom makes. It might be very tasty. Maybe you could even have it and then have other food with it, but just simply eating what's available to you at your given time. I talk to some guys too that say like, oh, well, I try to cook, but my mom gets upset at me and she tells me to leave the kitchen, all these other things. It's like, well, she'll get over it. Oh, my mom made this and I ate it and I want to look like this. It's like, bro, you have so many steps to take to just get on the correct path to looking like that. You're not going to be able to do it doing what you're doing now. And if you're in college too, there's a good chance that you're paying for access to the dining hall in the meal plan. We had access to these dining halls, and you could just sit in there for as long as you could and get all the food you wanted, or get a carry-out container, stuff that thing to the brim, go home, go to class, whatever, and eat all this food that you already paid for in your tuition. And these guys would be like, oh, that's boring, man. The dining hall sucks. I'm going to go out to eat here, here, here. All this money they already spent, and they're just piling more cost on top of it to oftentimes get worse food. They're going to go get pizza and donuts and wings and all this other stuff, go out to drink. Man, I was in that dining hall all the time, and I wasn't even getting serious gains back in my college days because I was in novice purgatory. I was ensnared in the fitness industry trap. I put in a lot of effort, and I was eating pretty often. It was not as much as I needed to because I didn't know better. I was like, oh, well, I can just recomposition. And I would try like little bulks, and I would eat junk food. I was like, oh, I can have cookies and brownies and stuff. And I would do that, and my weight still wouldn't go up that much, not in relation to the training. I mean, all the variables were out of whack, but I was putting in a lot of effort to the best of my ability then, but the payoff of that effort was not remotely close to where it should have been.
That's a much bigger invasion. It's much more invasive.
Yeah.
Than just going to the gym.
That's the biggest thing, man. The hard gainer with the low appetite, trying to shovel in the food. So not only do you have the annoying aspect of you have to just have food around you all the time, and that's another thing too, you're going to have to pack food with you. If you are a naturally skinny guy, don't gain weight easily, you're going to have to bring food to the job, to class. If you're driving for a while, pack it in the car, right? I mean, you just have to be eating. And you can eat out too, and spend a lot of money doing that, but if you're short on money, as a lot of young lifters are going to be by default. But that's really what this is, man, and I'm back on the bulk. The full day of eating video is coming. I know I've been saying that for a while now. I promise. It's almost here. But it is a full-time job. For example, me, I am eating from almost the moment I get up. I have no other option. To get the food in, that's what I have to do. I am in an endless battle with my own appetite to get the food down, and it is exhaustive. It's annoying. Now that said, it is the pinnacle of first world problems. Like, oh my goodness, all this food to eat. How am I ever going to live? I mean, there's way worse problems you could have. Keep that perspective in mind. But some guys are going to have to accept, man, if you want to get serious results, not just get generally good novice gains and look good and get healthier, if you want to get truly big and strong and look like these guys you see online, you're going to have to make your life revolve around food. And a lot of guys, like I mentioned, they already do that. Nothing enters their mouth unless it's been on the scale first. They track every single thing they eat, single grains of rice, they do all that, and they're still not getting remotely good results for the amount of time they pour into this. Because their information is that bad so far, and there's also the genetic aspect too. That's another conversation. It's very unfortunate, but it is what it is. But you cannot really judge how bad, per se, your genetics are until you button all of these things up. A lot of people make that judgment very quickly because they have all these holes in their game plan, and they think, oh, my genetics suck. Well, maybe they do, but they probably don't. They're probably at least closer to average than being that bad, but you have all of these flaws in your system, the training and the eating, and especially for the skinny guy, the eating is the biggest weakness. That is the Achilles heel. So you are going to have to be uncomfortable. You're going to have to sit there and just look at the food, and maybe hold your nose, drink water with every bite, find any way you can to stomach it. Like Rippetoe said, milk, that is a very good additive. If you are lactose intolerant, you can look into Fairlife and Lactate milk. At least those are the best options in the United States. And it's not merely just getting the calories in, you need to get nutrient-dense foods in too. That's why you see a lot of people that they do their bulk, but it's tons of junk food. That's the only way they can get the food in. At least that's what they think. And then they're eating a bunch of crap that's going to negatively affect their body composition. So you see a guy like Sam Sulek, who is on gallons of gear. His diet, from what I can tell, is what? It's a lot of, like, beef, and then he has milk and cereal and other treats. Someone like him is in a very unique circumstance. He can eat whatever he wants and still stay lean all the time. You're going to have to be more diligent with what you do. So that's the end of the starting strength video. Rippetoe makes good overall points in terms of course, you need to get bigger, but we go back to that weight gain with him, man. I mean, I get it, but you don't need to rush it that much. I mean, that's why a lot of guys become fearmongers about bulking. So it's really about finding that line between how much can you reliably gain weight, keep the muscle to fat gain ratio good, and still progress in the gym. I always say, eat the amount of food that you need to keep steadily progressing on most, ideally every exercise. Certain things later in the workout, smaller muscle groups, isolations, they might plateau a bit more. That's just par for the course. But of course, there's a lot of variables that come down to the individual here as well. If you guys would like to get in direct contact with me about your training and eating questions, the best way to do so is on the Patreon down below, and you'll also get lifetime access to our Discord server there as well. But this has been it for me, guys. Thank you for watching. Be sure to check out my other content on bulking and training as well. We'll get everything as buttoned up as we can, and be sure to use my links down below to save money on some great products and services. And thank you to the loyal Patreon supporters for your continued support of this channel. And I will catch you guys next time.